the desolate edge of reality, Belus desperately attempts to manipulate the chaotic energy currents, the void seeping into their bones, a chilling reminder of their precarious situation. His face etched with strain, wrestled with the chaotic energy around them, but the task seemed increasingly hopeless. That miserable Pirakman, Belus muttered, blaming their predicament on the power-hungry sunship, who had dragged them from Gaia to this desolate expanse in Uranus. His initial concern for Hymerus's state of mind had long since been eclipsed by the sheer frustration of navigating their way back. Hymerus watched Baelus's futile efforts with a detached air, his thoughts drifting. He felt a profound disconnection, almost indifference, to whether they ever returned to their universe. Suddenly, a figure drifted into view, riding a mass of swirling, incongruent energy. "Hi, I'm Koalemos," he announced, his voice cheerful and slightly off-key. Intrigued yet wary, they both questioned him. Belus, his voice laced with desperation, inquired about his origins. "Where did you come from?" "Oh, Gaia," Koalemos replied, a dreamy expression softening his features. "The love of my life." "Yes, well, can you help us get back?" Belus pressed, his patience wearing thin. "Sure," Koalemos responded, his enthusiasm unwavering. He gestured, attempting to manipulate the potential energy to transport them back to Gaia. Instead, Belus's limbs began to elongate, stretching like elastic. "What did you do to me?" Belus demanded, his voice strained. "Oh man," Koalemos said, scratching his head. "The thing is, this Immortal isn't always intuitive. It can result in, absurd madness, I think the other Machai sunship call it." "So you're a Machai sunship?" Hymerus asked, a flicker of interest in his eyes. "Why, yes," Koalemos exclaimed. "Koalemos is the name, though they usually just call me stupid, to be honest." "Why is that?" Hymerus inquired, genuinely curious. "Because I can't concentrate long enough to control my Immortal," Koalemos explained, his expression earnest. "If I could concentrate, I could probably do anything, but You just what?" Hymerus prompted. "Just what?" Koalemos asked, his eyes widening slightly. "What was I saying?" Belus, his limbs still unnaturally elongated, snapped, "Could you please try to concentrate long enough to change me back?" Hymerus, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his lips, observed Belus's predicament. "Oh, you'll be fine," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. He reached out, mimicking Koalemos's ability, and Belus inflated like a balloon. "Just hang around a bit." "Real funny," Belus grumbled, his voice muffled by his inflated form. "Guess you're feeling better, huh?" Hymerus chuckled, then returned Belus to normal. "Just jerking you around." "Wow," Koalemos said, his eyes wide with wonder. "That was that was your Immortal." "But how?" Koalemos asked. "I can mimic the abilities of those who are close enough," Hymerus explained, his voice flat. "But I can only—" He trailed off, his demeanor turning sullen once more. Koalemos, however, was undeterred by Hymerus's sudden gloom, his natural curiosity, a spark that burned brightly despite his inability to focus, was piqued. "That's amazing! You mean you could do anything I can do?" He bounced on the swirling energy mass he was riding, his enthusiasm infectious. "Like make Belus into a giant balloon again?" Belus, who was still recovering from his brief stint as an inflatable deity, shot Koalemos a withering glare. "Please no." Koalemos, oblivious to Belus's discomfort, continued. "Or, like, turn this whole empty space into a giant bouncy castle." He gestured vaguely, his eyes sparkling with childlike wonder. "Imagine. We could bounce our way back to Gaia." "Koalemos," Belus said, his voice strained. "While I appreciate your enthusiasm, perhaps we should focus on a more practical solution." He gestured towards the endless void, like finding a way out of here that doesn't involve turning this desolate expanse into an amusement park. "But it would be fun," Koalemos protested, his sincerity radiating from him. He genuinely couldn't understand why they weren't excited by the concept. "And I'm sure Gaia would appreciate it. She loves fun." Hymerus, watching the interaction with a detached amusement, suddenly felt a flicker of something akin to inspiration, or perhaps desperation. He had absorbed the nature of Koalemos' absurd madness, the ability to imbue things with potential energy. He had also been around Belus long enough to understand the chaotic energy currents that Belus attempted to manipulate. Koalemos, Hemera said, his voice surprisingly firm. Show me how you activate your Immortal. The potential energy aspect of it. Koalemos, his attention immediately captured by Chimerus' sudden interest, beamed. Oh, sure. It's super easy. You just imagine it. He waved his hands, his expression earnest. Like you feel the energy, the potential of everything, and then you just make it happen. Belus watched the exchange with a mixture of hope and apprehension. And what exactly are you planning to make happen, Chimerus? Chimerus, his eyes fixed on the swirling energy currents around them, ignored Baelus's question. He could feel the potential energy, the raw, chaotic power that Koalemos wielded with such carefree abandon. He could also feel the way Belus attempted to control the currents, to bend them to his will. He could feel the threads of both abilities, intertwining within his own essence. I think, Chimerus said slowly, his voice laced with a newfound determination. I think I can combine them. He reached out, his hands trembling slightly, and focused on the energy around them. He imagined the potential, the raw, unbridled power that Koalemos channeled. He imagined the way Belus manipulated the currents, the intricate patterns he wove to navigate the void. He imagined them together, a fusion of chaotic potential and controlled direction. The void around them shimmered, the empty space vibrating with an unseen energy. The swirling energy mass that Koalemos rode began to pulse, its colours shifting and changing. The chaotic energy currents that Belus had struggled to control began to coalesce, forming a swirling vortex. What are you doing? Belus asked, his voice laced with a mixture of awe and fear. I'm making a way out, Hemera said, his voice barely a whisper. A way back to Gaia, a way home. He focused all his energy, all his will, on the swirling vortex. He imagined Gaia, the vibrant, life-filled planet that had been their home. He imagined the warmth of the sun, the scent of flowers, the sound of laughter. He imagined the connection, the belonging, that he had lost. And then, with a final, desperate surge of energy, he unleashed the combined power of Koalemos' absurd madness and Belus's chaotic energy control. The vortex pulsed, its light intensifying, and the void around them began to dissolve, revealing a swirling tunnel of light and energy. Hold on, Chimerus said, his voice strained. We're going home. He stepped into the swirling tunnel, Belus and Koalemos following close behind. The void around them dissolved, replaced by a dizzying rush of light and colour. They were moving, hurtling through the emptiness, towards the distant beacon of Gaia. The swirling tunnel of light and energy deposited them back into the familiar warmth of Gaia's atmosphere. They tumbled out, landing on a grassy knoll overlooking a familiar bustling city. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers and the distant sounds of laughter, a stark contrast to the desolate emptiness they had just left. Chimerus, slightly disoriented, took a deep breath, the familiar scent of Gaia filling his lungs. He turned to Koalemos, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Thank you, Koalemos. You helped us get back. Koalemos beamed, his enthusiasm undimmed by their chaotic journey. No problem. It was fun, though I'm still not entirely sure what you did there. Belus, dusting himself off, regarded Chimerus with a mixture of relief and curiosity. Indeed, that was impressive. I've never seen chaotic energy manipulated in such a way. Chimerus shrugged, his smile fading slightly. It was a combination of things. Your control, his potential. He paused, his gaze drifting towards Koalemos. I should tell you both. I'm Chimerus, an Erotes sonship. He then turned to Belus. And Belus here is an Anarchy's sonship. Koalemos' eyes widened, his expression a mixture of awe and excitement. An Erotes sonship? And an Anarchy's sonship? Wow, that's so cool. He bounced on his heels, his energy practically radiating from him. We have to play. Play? Belus asked, his brow furrowed. Yes! A battle, Koalemos exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. A friendly battle, of course, just to see what you can do. Himmerus, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, suddenly remembered the tales he had heard of the Machai sunships. Their love of battles, wars, and competition was legendary, a trait that often bordered on obsession. Of course, Himmerus said, a faint smile playing on his lips. I remember now. The Machai sunships. You live for this. Exactly, Koalemos cheered, his enthusiasm infectious. It'll be fun, a real test of our abilities. He gestured expansively. We can use the city as our arena. Imagine all the potential energy we can unleash. Belus, however, seemed less than thrilled. I believe I'll pass. I'm rather tired from our adventure. He gave Hymerus a pointed look. Perhaps you could indulge him, Hymerus. I'll observe. Himmerus, despite his lingering melancholy, found himself intrigued by the challenge. He had absorbed Koalemos's ability, and he was curious to see how it would interact with his own. Very well, he said, a hint of a challenge in his voice. A friendly battle, then, but don't expect me to hold back. Wouldn't dream of it. Koalemos grinned, his eyes alight with excitement. He raised his hands, the air around them shimmering with potential energy. Let the games begin. The city square, once a bustling hub of commerce and conversation, transformed into an impromptu arena. Koalemos, his eyes gleaming with excitement, began to manipulate the potential energy within the surrounding structures. The cobblestones shimmered, threatening to erupt into geysers of raw power. The ornate fountain, usually a source of gentle trickling water, pulsed with an ominous, contained energy. Ready? Koalemos chirped, his voice echoing through the transformed square. Himmerus, his own energy swirling around him, adopted a defensive stance. He had absorbed Koalemos's ability, but he understood that raw power was only one aspect of the battle. He needed to anticipate Koalemos's chaotic mind, his unpredictable movements. Ready, Hymerus replied, his voice low and steady. Koalemos, with a sudden, almost childish grin, unleashed his first attack. The cobblestones beneath Hymerus's feet erupted, sending shards of rock flying. Himmerus, anticipating the move, leaped into the air, avoiding the chaotic barrage. He landed lightly on the edge of the now pulsating fountain, his gaze fixed on Koalemos. Koalemos, undeterred, began to manipulate the fountain's energy. The water, no longer a gentle stream, surged and twisted, forming a massive swirling vortex. He sent the vortex hurtling towards Hymerus, the water crackling with raw power. Hymerus, realizing he couldn't dodge the attack, focused his energy. He mimicked Belus's ability, attempting to control the chaotic energy within the water vortex. He wove intricate patterns, attempting to redirect the flow, to dissipate the power. The water, caught between Koalemos's chaotic impulse and Hymerus's calculated control, began to fluctuate wildly. Whoa! Koalemos exclaimed, his eyes wide with surprise. That's amazing. You're controlling it. Hymerus, his brow furrowed in concentration, managed to redirect the vortex, sending it spiraling harmlessly into the sky. The water dissipated, raining down on the square like a gentle shower. My turn, Himmerus said, his voice laced with a newfound confidence. He focused on the potential energy within the cobblestones, mimicking Koalemos's initial attack. But instead of a chaotic eruption, he wove a controlled pattern, sending a wave of precisely directed energy towards Koalemos. The energy formed a series of shimmering, razor-sharp blades, slicing through the air with deadly accuracy. Koalemos, caught off guard by the precision of the attack, scrambled to avoid the blades. He manipulated the surrounding air, creating a series of shifting shields, but the blades, guided by Hymerus's calculated control, pierced through the defences with ease. Koalemos, his enthusiasm momentarily dampened, was forced to retreat, his movements becoming increasingly erratic. Okay, Koalemos said, his voice slightly strained. Okay, you're good. Really good. He paused, his eyes narrowing in concentration. But I'm not giving up. He unleashed a wave of chaotic energy, manipulating the very air around them. The air shimmered and distorted, creating a disorienting haze. The cobblestones began to levitate, swirling around them like a chaotic storm. The fountain, now a geyser of raw power, erupted, sending a torrent of water and energy towards Homerus. Homerus, his senses overwhelmed by the chaotic onslaught, struggled to maintain his focus. He could feel the raw power of Koalemos' ability, the unpredictable nature of his attacks. He could also feel the lingering darkness within himself, the chaotic energy that threatened to overwhelm his control. He knew he couldn't win this battle with raw power alone. He needed to find a way to use Koalemos' chaos against him, to turn his unpredictable attacks into a weapon. He focused on the chaotic energy surrounding him, attempting to understand its patterns, its rhythms. He saw the way Koalemos' mind worked, the fleeting thoughts, the impulsive actions. He saw the inherent instability in his attacks, the lack of control that made them so unpredictable. And then he saw an opening. He allowed the chaotic energy to flow through him, to merge with his own essence. He became a conduit for Koalemos' chaos, a mirror reflecting his unpredictable attacks. He redirected the levitating cobblestones, sending them hurtling back towards Koalemos. He manipulated the geyser of water, transforming it into a swirling vortex that surrounded Koalemos, trapping him in a cage of his own chaotic energy. Koalemos, his eyes wide with surprise, found himself trapped, his own power turned against him. He struggled to break free, but the vortex, guided by Homerus' newfound control, held him captive. "Okay," Koalemos said, his voice laced with a mixture of awe and defeat. "Okay, I yield. You win."